My boyfriend gets angry if I don't text back within 5 minutes. I, 24F, have been dating my boyfriend, 25M, for almost 2 years now. We met in one of those very cliche but kind of magical ways through mutual friends at a birthday dinner. He was charming, funny, the type who could make everyone in the room laugh, and honestly, I was smitten way faster than I thought I'd be. I had been single for a while before meeting him, and he just had this way of making me feel like the center of attention. Like I was really seen. From the very beginning, one of the things I noticed about him was how much he loved texting. Like, I'm not kidding. When we first exchanged numbers, he texted me that same night, and we literally stayed up until 3 a.m. just messaging back and forth. At the time, I thought it was adorable. I'd never had a guy who seemed so eager to talk to me all the time. He'd send long good morning paragraphs, silly memes throughout the day, and then long good night texts. It felt intense, but in that, oh my God, this is a real connection kind of way. And honestly, in those first few weeks, I loved it. I was texting him constantly too, and it was fun. I'd be at work sneaking a smile at my phone. My friends would tease me about always being glued to my messages, and I brushed it off because I was so happy. I thought, wow, he really cares. I thought that was just the honeymoon phase of dating. Lots of attention, constant communication. But even in those early weeks, there were little signs that his attachment to texting wasn't just about being excited about me. I remember once I was out with a friend for lunch, and I didn't reply for maybe 20 minutes. I came back to like 7 texts from him, some of them lighthearted, like, hello, and some of them were serious, like, did I say something wrong? I laughed it off at the time and reassured him, but something about it made me pause. Like, 20 minutes isn't that long, right? Still, I shrugged it off because I told myself, he just likes me a lot. He just wants to talk to me. And maybe a part of me liked it too. It made me feel wanted, like I was finally with someone who was actually excited about me, not playing games, not being distant. So I told myself it was fine. As the months went on, this constant communication became our normal. We texted literally all day, every day. I'd wake up to a message, we'd chat while I was getting ready, he'd check in during lunch, and then we'd FaceTime at night. And if I ever didn't answer quickly, he'd sometimes send a follow-up text right away, like, question mark, question mark, question mark, or are you there? Again, at first I kind of giggled at it, like, oh, he's needy, but in a cute way. But slowly, little things started to nag at me. Like, if I didn't respond within a few minutes, I'd notice his tone in the next messages would shift. He'd go from playful to kind of sharp, like, wow, busy? Or guess you're ignoring me. I didn't want to think too much of it at the time. I thought maybe he was just joking, maybe I was being overly sensitive. I told myself, he's just more into constant communication than I am. Looking back, I think I ignored a lot of those little red flags because I was so wrapped up in how much I liked him and how exciting it all felt. I wanted it to work. I wanted him to keep seeing me as someone special, and I didn't want to be the girl who complains about too many texts. So I just went along with it. I told myself this was just what modern relationships were like. Constant connection, constant contact. I mean, isn't that what everyone does now? Maybe I was the weird one for feeling like sometimes I needed space. After the first few months, things started to settle into a routine. We were out of the honeymoon haze, though we still texted a lot. Honestly, more than I think most couples I know do. And that's when I started realizing that what had felt exciting in the beginning was slowly becoming pressure. I work full-time in an office, and it's not one of those jobs where you can just sit around on your phone all day. I deal with clients, deadlines, meetings, and sometimes my phone is literally across the room while I'm running around handling stuff. But my boyfriend didn't really get that. Whenever I didn't answer within 5 minutes, I'd notice that tone shift again. At first, it was little comments like, "You're always so busy," or "Guess your job is more important than me." The first real fight about it happened maybe 6 months in. I remember it so clearly because it was one of the first times I thought, wait, this doesn't feel right. I was in a meeting that ran long, and I came back to my phone afterwards to find 12 missed texts and 3 missed calls from him. The text went from casual to "Hey babe" to slightly impatient to "Hello" to downright accusatory to "Are you seriously ignoring me?" My stomach sank when I saw them all, and instead of feeling happy to talk to him, I felt this wave of anxiety. When I called him back, he answered immediately, voice sharp. "Where the hell were you?" I tried to explain, meeting, busy, couldn't have my phone, but he wouldn't let it go. He said something like, "It takes 2 seconds to text busy. Don't act like you couldn't." I was shocked how angry he was, and I remember blurting out, "You're overreacting." That was the first time he hung up on me. I cried in the bathroom after that call. It wasn't just the fight, it was the realization that his love didn't feel safe in that moment. It felt conditional, like if I wasn't available 24/7, then I wasn't a good girlfriend. And I hated that feeling. But being me, I apologized later that night. I sent him a long text about how I didn't mean to upset him, how I tried to be more mindful, how I wanted us to communicate better. And he did soften after that. He said he just gets anxious when he doesn't hear from me, that he loves me so much it makes him panic, that he's afraid of being ignored or abandoned. And instead of feeling like those were red flags, I felt guilty, like maybe it's my job to reassure him. So I started bending. I tried harder to keep my phone nearby, even during work. I'd excuse myself to send him a quick text, still alive, just busy in between meetings. I started carrying my phone to the bathroom, just so I wouldn't miss his messages. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. Relationships are about compromise, right? If it calmed his anxiety, what was the harm?
But slowly, I noticed the harm. I couldn't relax the way I used to. My phone buzzed and I jumped. If I saw his name pop up, I'd feel a little knot in my chest until I replied. My friends noticed too. Once I was out for brunch and my friend joked, "Wow, you're like Pavlov's dog with that phone. Does he have you on a timer?" I laughed it off, but it stung because part of me knew it was true. And the worst part? When I did manage to reply right away, it wasn't like he was grateful or relieved. It just felt expected. Like that was the bare minimum. And if I didn't, there was always a chance of an argument brewing. That's when I started realizing this wasn't just a quirk of his. It wasn't just him being really into me. It was a pattern. And the more I thought about it, the more I started to feel suffocated. But at the same time, I loved him. He was sweet in so many other ways. He'd cook for me, plan little dates, surprise me with my favorite snacks. It felt confusing because how could someone who could be so thoughtful and kind also make me feel like I was walking on eggshells every time I touched my phone? And I guess that's when the shift really hit me. It wasn't cute anymore. It wasn't flattering. It was exhausting. It didn't just stop with that one fight. If anything, that moment was like opening the door to a hallway full of the same arguments, just dressed up in slightly different ways each time. After I started trying harder to text back quickly, it seemed to help for a while. He'd still sometimes send a question mark if I took too long, but at least the fights weren't exploding into full-on blow-ups every time. I thought, maybe I figured out the balance. Just text him within a few minutes, keep the peace, and everything will be fine. But the problem with that was it made me hyper aware of every single ping, buzz, or notification. My phone basically became a leash. Like, I'd be mid-conversation with someone in real life and suddenly zone out because I saw his name on my screen and thought, oh God, I have to reply right now or he's gonna think I'm ignoring him. And if I couldn't answer, like if I was in the middle of something important, my brain would spiral. What if he gets mad? What if he thinks I don't care? It was this constant low-level anxiety. The little incidents started stacking up. Like one time I was cooking dinner and left my phone in the other room. When I came back 20 minutes later, he'd sent 4 texts in a row. Babe, are you there? Seriously? And then, wow, okay. When I called him, he sounded cold and he said something like, I just don't get why you can't keep your phone with you. It's not that hard. And I felt like a child being scolded.
I ended up apologizing even though all I did was make pasta without my phone in my hand for 20 minutes. Another time, I was driving and obviously couldn't text back right away. When I finally pulled over, I had this flood of angry messages waiting. You could have sent a voice note before driving. Don't you care if I worry? You just don't prioritize me. And even though I knew it was unreasonable, I still felt guilty. Like somehow I was the one in the wrong for choosing road safety over instant replies. It got to the point where I started lying sometimes just to keep the peace. If I missed the text because I was napping, I'd say I was doing laundry. If I was in the shower, I'd say I was on the phone with my mom. I thought it would be easier to give him excuses he'd accept rather than argue about something as simple as me not having my phone glued to me every second. But that also made me feel icky. Like I was sneaking around in my own relationship just to avoid conflict. And the fights themselves, they got more intense. He'd raise his voice over the phone, accuse me of not caring about his feelings, and then sometimes go silent for hours to punish me. I'd be the one crying, sending multiple apologies, trying to smooth things over. It was this cycle. He'd get mad, I'd feel terrible, I'd over-explain or apologize, and then he'd forgive me, but only after I had basically begged for forgiveness. And meanwhile, my own sense of self was starting to shrink. I used to be pretty independent. I loved spending time with my friends or just zoning out on my own watching Netflix or reading without checking my phone. But with him, that freedom evaporated. Even when I was alone, I wasn't really alone because I was constantly tethered to my phone, waiting for the next text. The worst part was how unpredictable it felt. Sometimes, if I was late replying, he'd just laugh and say, "You're slow today." Other times, the same delay would trigger a full meltdown. I never knew which version of him I was going to get, so I was always on edge. It was like walking on eggshells, but digital eggshells. And emotionally, I started to feel drained. I'd go to bed exhausted, not from my job or my day, but from trying to manage his emotions through a phone screen. It's a weird kind of tiredness, one I didn't even know existed until I lived it. The kind where your brain is always half focused on something else, always calculating whether you've done enough to keep someone else calm. And I think that's when I realized this wasn't just a quirk of his. It wasn't just him being really into me, it was a pattern. And it was starting to feel like control. The night everything finally snapped wasn't even anything dramatic. It wasn't like I was out partying or ignoring him on purpose. I was just living my life. But that night showed me exactly how fragile this whole arrangement was and how much weight I had been carrying without even realizing. It was a Saturday, and I had plans to go out with a couple of my girlfriends. We'd been talking about this dinner for weeks, and I was excited because I don't get a ton of chances to just relax with them anymore. My life had basically turned into this constant balancing act. Work, relationship, chores, and I was craving some actual fun. So I got dressed up, did my makeup, and felt good for the first time in a while. My boyfriend knew about these plans. I even reminded him earlier in the day, like, "Hey, I'll be with the girls tonight, so I might be slower replying." He gave me a little okay, but I could tell from his tone that he wasn't thrilled. Still, I brushed it off. I thought, I'm allowed to have a night out, right? At the restaurant, it was loud and busy. We were laughing, catching up, taking silly pictures. It was just one of those nights where you're so present in the moment that you don't even think about your phone. Which should be normal, but with him, it was basically a crime. My phone buzzed a few times, and I glanced quickly to see it was him. I texted back something like, "All good, food's here, heart," and then put it face down. But then my battery dropped fast, because of course I hadn't charged it fully before leaving. By the time we ordered dessert, my phone completely died. And I thought, whatever, I'll charge it when I get home, he'll understand. I was so wrong. When I got back home, maybe an hour and a half later, I plugged my phone in and it exploded with notifications. I'm talking dozens.
He had called me at least 15 times, left voicemails, sent this rapid-fire chain of texts. They started kind of normal. Hey, babe, what's up? Then got impatient. Why aren't you answering? Question mark, question mark. Are you serious right now? And by the end, they were straight up furious. Stuff like, you're so disrespectful. Clearly you don't care about me. If you can't even reply, what's the point of this relationship? My stomach dropped. I literally sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through message after message, and felt my chest tighten. I wasn't even angry at first. I was embarrassed. Like, how did I let things get this bad? Who reacts like this over a phone? I called him right away, heart pounding, but when he answered, he didn't even say hello. He just launched into me. Where the fuck were you? Do you know what it's like sitting here wondering if you're ignoring me? Do you even care about how I feel? His voice was sharp, almost spitting the words out, and I couldn't even get a word in. I tried to explain, my phone died. I told you I was out. I wasn't ignoring you, but he wasn't hearing it. He snapped back, if you loved me, you would have made sure your phone was charged. That's basic respect. And I just sat there stunned because in his mind, it wasn't about a dead phone. It was about proof of my love. That cut deep. Because how do you even argue with that? How do you defend yourself against someone who ties your entire worth as a partner to whether or not your phone battery lasted through dinner? We ended up in this screaming match, me crying, him accusing, me begging him to understand it wasn't intentional, him repeating that if I really cared, it never would have happened. At one point, he even said, other girls would never do this to their boyfriends. That line still rings in my head because it was like he was comparing me to some imaginary perfect girlfriend who exists only to text on command. When the call finally ended, I just collapsed on my bed and sobbed. Not just because of the fight, but because I realized how utterly drained I felt. I couldn't even enjoy a simple night out without it turning into a war zone. I felt trapped, like no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. The next day, he acted like nothing had happened. He sent me a good morning text, a heart emoji, like we hadn't just ripped each other apart the night before. And that almost made it worse because it made me feel crazy. Like, did I overreact? Was it not as big of a deal as it felt in the moment? But the truth is, it was a big deal. It was the first time I really thought, this is not okay. This isn't just quirky or needy. This is toxic. After that night, I couldn't stop replaying everything in my head. The yelling, the accusations, the guilt that washed over me when I saw those missed calls. It was like the entire relationship was sitting heavy on my chest and I couldn't breathe properly. I have always been the type to second-guess myself. I don't like conflict, I hate making people upset, and I tend to blame myself first before pointing fingers at anyone else. So in the days after that fight, I kept wondering, am I the problem? Am I not attentive enough? Am I just a bad girlfriend? I compared it to my past relationships and the differences hit me hard. My last boyfriend was more laid back, maybe even too laid back. He'd go hours without replying, and I never once thought it meant he didn't care. It was just life, right? So I guess part of me is struggling to understand how something so normal in my old relationships has turned into the biggest crime in this one. And it's not like I don't text him. I text him constantly. I keep my phone near me. I check in. I tell him where I'm going, when I'll be back. I even give him little play-by-plays of my day just so he doesn't feel left out. But still, somehow it's never enough. And I don't know if that's because I'm failing or because his expectations are just impossible. The thing is, I know he has insecurities. He's opened up about being cheated on in the past, about feeling abandoned by people he loved. And my heart aches for him when he tells me those stories. I want to be the person who makes him feel safe, the person who proves not everyone will leave. But what I'm starting to realize is I can't fix that for him. No matter how fast I text back, no matter how many reassurances I give, it's like pouring water into a bucket with a hole in it. It's never going to fill up. And honestly, it's exhausting me. I feel like I've lost little pieces of myself along the way. I used to love reading before bed, just turning my phone on silent and getting lost in a book. Now, I can't even do that without checking my messages every 5 minutes. I used to enjoy spontaneous nights with friends, but now I'm terrified my phone will die or I'll get distracted and he'll blow up again. It's like my whole life revolves around managing his reactions. And I hate admitting that. But then the doubt creeps in again. Maybe I'm being selfish. Maybe if I really loved him, I'd want to be glued to my phone, because that's what he needs. Maybe relationships are about sacrifice, and this is just my version of it. Maybe this is just how love looks for him. And that's the part that really messes me up. I can't tell if my frustration is valid or if I'm just not cut out for this level of closeness. Am I too independent? Too cold? Have I been spoiled by more relaxed relationships, so now I can't handle someone who actually cares this much? The cycle in my head goes round and round. I feel smothered. Then I feel guilty for feeling smothered. Then I think maybe I'm overreacting. Then I remember how panicked I felt staring at dozens of angry texts. It's like I can't trust my own judgment anymore. And honestly, I'm scared. Because if this is what our relationship is like after less than 2 years, what does the future look like? Will I always be chained to my phone, living in fear of a missed notification? Or worse, will I eventually just break under the pressure and leave and prove all his fears right? That thought haunts me the most. The more I sit with all of this, the more torn I feel. It's like I'm standing at a crossroads, and no matter which path I look down, it feels wrong somehow. On one hand, I know relationships require effort, compromise, and patience. I know my boyfriend isn't pulling this behavior out of thin air. He's reacting from his own pain, his past, his insecurities. He's told me how anxious he gets when he doesn't hear from me, how his mind jumps to worst-case scenarios. And part of me really does sympathize with that. I know what it's like to feel insecure, to crave reassurance. So there's this voice in my head saying, if you really love him, shouldn't you just give him what he needs? Like, it doesn't actually take me that long to send a quick text, right? Hey, busy, we'll call later. That's a 5-second task. Why does it feel like such a huge burden? If those little messages mean so much to him, maybe I'm being stubborn for resisting. Maybe I'm clinging too tightly to my own independence when I should be focusing more on his comfort. But then there's the other side. The part of me that feels suffocated and honestly controlled. Because it's not just about one text. It's about the expectation that I always have to be available, no matter what I'm doing, no matter who I'm with. It's about how a dead phone or a 20-minute delay spirals into accusations and fights. It's about how my freedom to just exist without constant digital tethering has been slowly stripped away. It's not about texting. It's about what it represents. Trust, or the lack of it. Space, or the lack of it. Respect, or the lack of it. And that's the part I can't shake. Because even though I want to be compassionate, I can't ignore how this makes me feel. Anxious, drained, on edge, like I'm always one delayed message away from another explosion. And that's not love, is it? At least not the kind of love I imagined for myself. But then, here comes the guilt again. I wonder if maybe my idea of love is unrealistic. Maybe this is just what being in a serious relationship looks like. Constant communication, constant reassurance, constant sacrifice. Maybe I've been too influenced by those Instagram posts about healthy boundaries and self-care. And in reality, couples just deal with each other's baggage however they can. I don't know. I feel stuck in this loop where every time I think, no, this is too much, this is wrong, another part of me whispers, but what if you're the one who's wrong? What if you're just not giving enough? That's the core of it. I can't tell if I'm setting healthy boundaries or if I'm just being selfish. I can't tell if his anger is a red flag or if it's just his way of showing how deeply he cares. And that uncertainty is eating me alive. So here I am, writing all of this out because I honestly don't know what to think anymore. Part of me feels like I'm slowly being smothered under the weight of his expectations, like I can't breathe without checking my phone every 5 minutes. But another part of me feels cruel for even thinking that way, because I know his neediness comes from a place of pain, not malice. I love him. That's the hardest part. I love the way he makes me laugh, the way he remembers little things about me, the way he can be so thoughtful and caring when he wants to be. But then I also hate the pit in my stomach every time I see his name pop up on my screen and wonder, is this going to be a sweet message or another fight waiting to happen? I don't know if I'm setting reasonable boundaries or if I'm just failing to meet the needs of the person I chose to be with. I don't know if I should try harder or if trying harder means losing myself completely. So I'm asking you all, am I overreacting or is this a red flag I shouldn't ignore?